the negative side to this argument has said that the United Nations has used human rights to help people. The human rights are unrealistic, however, because the United Nations has no power to enforce these. In the United Nations Charter, it says that one of their main goals was to take effective collective measures for the prevention and removal of threats to the peace. And they also wanted to promote and encouraging respect for human rights and for fundamental freedoms for all, without distinction in race, sex, language, or religion. In the Human Rights International Law by the United Nations, it says, international human rights law laid down obligations which states are bound to respect. By becoming parties to international treaties, states assume obligations and duties under international law to respect, protect, and to fulfill human rights. In the charters that the United Nations has laid out, they have made human rights an important issue. However, they don't have any means of enforcing this. And on the United Nations website, Austin Phillip wrote, but in most cases, it is less a question of enforcement by the UN or forces acting under its authority than one of trying to persuade governments and people in general to respect human rights. So they're not really enforcing the laws, even though the human rights are international law. They're just suggesting them as examples or something that's guidelines for anything. And in a book by Roth Bruce called No Time to Kill, he says, the United Nations does not have a standing law enforcement agency to enforce international law. So the United Nations has no way of actually trying to enforce human rights other than by using the standing members, and it's hard to go around with. Another point that was made was that the United Nations is using its money wisely and to help other countries develop. But in 2009, a report came out that 2 United States agencies spent millions on Afghanistan construction projects. These projects were useless. One of them that was built was an airstrip in Kalat that budgeted at $300,000, but ended up costing $749,000, which is twice what the budget was. And after it was built, it couldn't even be used by military planes, so the United Nations had no use for it. And another project that was just a waste of funds was a $375,000 headquarters for an Afghani central bank that lacked electricity and plumbing. Because of the plumbing not working, water went into one of the vaults and actually destroyed the local currency. So people who had money in the bank actually lost money. And another point that was made by the negative side was that the United Nations actually help nations like in the Congo or Venezuela, but in a report that was done, it was found out that soldiers in the Democratic Republic of Congo can sexually and violently violate young girls with impunity. So there is no one's going to tell them not to do it, and there's been a report. And in a study done in 1996 by UNICEF, it showed that 1 in 6 out of 12 countries studied that the arrival of peacekeeping groups has been associated with a rapid rise in prostitution. So the soldiers have actually been making it worse for children living there.